Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and today I'll be talking about The Punisher issue 63, The Big Checkout, or as I used to call it, Face Off, because that's what it said on the cover. This is part of the second volume of The Punisher's original run, which I believe started in 1987, and of course The Punisher is an anti-hero created by Marvel Comics, and if you saw the last video I did, you'll know I'm a huge fan. I think it's the best hero in Marvel's whole lineup, but again, that's just my opinion. I also have made a vocal opinion that I am a huge fan of like pretty much any film incarnation of the Punisher. I even like the show, which I mean is a surprise because I fucking hate Netflix and I hate Disney's acquisition of Marvel, but they did put out a good Punisher show until they fucking canceled it. I was always really more into Garth Ennis's run of the Punisher, specifically Welcome Back Frank and the Max line. So, you know, even though I had a bunch of these original issues, it wasn't my main go-to, but there were a handful that I definitely do remember growing up that I read front to back all the time. And the more that I think about it, a lot of them were part of Volume 2. And I don't mean to take away from Volume 1 because there was definitely some banger issues there, but it was still kind of hokey. The Punisher was still finding its grounding. And I think it really nailed it with Volume 2. I mean, this is where we got introduced to Jigsaw, the Final Days storyline. Fucking Punisher teamed up with Cage at one point and turned black, which it was wild because it's like Soul Man meets the Punisher. There's the Euro Hit storyline. Like, you know, there's one where he goes to space and like fucks up a space shuttle. Like, it is just a wild run. It is really cool. And I think, like I said, it hit its stride in Volume 2. But again, I could be wrong. I'm not a super like expert on superhero comics or anything. I mean, I even have some opinions about superhero comics that would make people fucking, their heads would explode Scanner style. Like, I don't think, personally, superhero comics got really good until, like, the late 80s, early 90s, when they just started to be more adult and mature with their themes. I think, like, the runs earlier are really hokey and really childish, which, I mean, to be fair, comics were made for kids, but I really do like the more serious shit because I'm not a fucking kid. I don't like that Disney shit. I want to read some gritty fucking action every once in a while. And this is a prime example of it because even though this is a single issue, this thing is wall-to-wall action. It doesn't let up. It is fucking wild. You know, it's a big change up too because the Punisher usually, well, to my recollection growing up, he really only went after mobsters and like soldiers and big bads like Bushwhacker and shit like that. You know what I mean? Very rarely was it like one-offs. I mean, he did deal with crackheads and fucked up shit like that, but it wasn't the primary thing. There was always a bigger enemy out there, but it was always like, I think the stories where he was going after one-off psychos were always more interesting because that's pretty realistic. The world's full of one-off psychos. It's not always just some giant like corporate conspiracy, military conspiracy, you know. And these stories, again, I think I'm just a huge fan of because of how grounded they are. I think the cover was a big draw too because I'm a huge horror fan. There's some guys with Jason masks on there. Also definitely reminds you of like Cobra or like Heat and shit like that. A lot like Cobra, honestly, more Heat kind of because of the mask, but Cobra because the whole grocery store psycho hold up and shit, and it's just wild. I think a lot of these things subconsciously just drew me to this issue, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. If you'll notice by the thumbnail, I don't actually have a picture of the issue from my collection. I do have it, but it's in a collected edition called Marvel's Epic Collection for, you know, the Punisher. They did a whole bunch of other ones like for Spider-Man and like Silver Surfer and shit like that. And to my recollection, they've completed the runs on all of those. I don't know with the Punisher if they actually completed all of them. I could be wrong on that, but I was looking for the ones that contain the issues in the 80s because there's one called Firefight that I'm a huge fan of. Again, it's got a really sick cover too. Hopefully I'll cover that at some point, but I couldn't find it. So maybe because Marvel and Stan Lee have had a hard on for trying to like put the Punisher on the back burner, they didn't finish the run. You know, I could be wrong again, but every other run of the Punisher they've completed, but for some reason with the original one it's pretty hard, and I have to kind of get a handful of the single issues, and it can just be a pain in the ass tracking them all down. If you guys collect comics, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you want to find the single issue for this and you don't want to drop like $40 on the collected edition, it goes for about $2, which is pretty good. I mean, most single issues should be anywhere from about $1 to $5 depending on what you're getting, but yeah, this one's not that expensive, fairly common to find. Really, if you want to get it for the cover, that's cool, you know, but this is also a pretty cool story, which we're going to get into right now. Again, this was released in 1992 in spring. Editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco, written by Chuck Dixon, penciled by Todd Smith, inked by Joseph Rubinstein. colored by Mary Javins, lettered by Jim Novak, and edited by Don Daly. Now, this story, while it's serious and pretty action-packed, has a lot of humorous notes. I mean, for fuck's sakes, this thing literally begins with the Punisher saying, "No matter where you turn, there's a decision to be made. Life or death, right or wrong, regular or crunchy." And it's pretty funny because it shows some of the Punisher's more human aspects, like, you know, grocery shopping and thinking on life and stuff. But that shit all gets shattered because before that, we see a bunch of drug addicts looking for crystal powder or pills. They can't find any, so they get in their van, they drive down to the supermarket that the Punisher happens to be shopping at. And of course, they try to hold the place up and rob it for the money, but because they're a bunch of speed freaks, they're all over the place. They kill a security guard and they start taking hostages. And the Punisher basically snaps into it. He tells one of the, fucking one of the grocery clerks, sorry, I spaced out, I'm kind of baked, which... maybe the Punisher would have shot me for that, but who knows, man? Please, no, Frank, don't. But anyway, he tells this grocery clerk to get everyone out of the aisles and to duck so there's not a body count. And he takes these guys out one by one. First off with like a knife, and then he like makes a bunch of chemical gas with ammonia and shit, and then he like pretty much sends it down a shopping cart. They inadvertently shoot it because they're trigger happy. Creates a gas cloud, and he takes them out one by one. And of course, you know, it's the Punisher. These guys stood no match against him, but it was still a cool fight to see. Again, this comic, you go through it pretty fucking fast because it's not part of like a 1 through 6 thing like Euro Hit or anything like that, but it's still a pretty fun little jolt of action. You got some sick Punisher action and shit like that, you know. This is pretty much like just a day in the life as the Punisher. There's nothing too like, you know, out there crazy, but still a fun little read. Again, the fucking psychos in this were great. I mean, I think like they were funny as fuck because they were just burnout wackos, but also their outfits were pretty cool. Memorable too. Again, like these guys had like Jason masks and fucking like ski masks and like fucking pantyhose fucking masks and shit. So definite change up from mercenaries and like, you know, mobsters in suits and stuff, which is always cool to see different villains show up. Again, a reason why I always like the Punisher is if these same kind of punk psychos showed up in Spider-Man, they get draped up by webs and that would be the end of it. Whereas the Punisher just fucking ices them, which I think is more logical, well, in a comic book world, because these same assholes won't come back in the next issue and cause problems for, like, you know, the Punisher again, because he dealt with them. So, you know, could be controversial. Maybe maybe I just don't get superheroes. I mean, there are ones I like, but like, it's an exception to the rule. Like with Spider-Man, it's stuff like Kraven's Last Hunt because like Kraven brains himself at the end. Like, I don't know, man. Like the Punisher has just always been ice cold, and I think that's why I like this storyline, this character so much. And even these original issues can just pull off some of that like iciness every once in a while. Again, the original issues I've kind of avoided here and there because they can be a little campy, but this is the 90s. This is when shit started getting into full gear, so you don't really get too much of that in volume 2. You know, hopefully I'll get into the Jigsaw story at some point because that's when shit gets really cool. He's definitely one of my favorite Marvel villains of all time, aside from being one of my favorite Punisher villains. But yeah, definite Cobra vibes in this comic, man. The big checkout totally reminded me of Cobra. Like I was saying, that opening where like the Psycho is holding up the grocery store. This time there's 4 of them, and the Punisher just kills him as easily as Stallone killed the one, bro. Like it was wild. I think maybe they got inspiration from Cobra because that came out in 87. You know, I could be wrong, but there was serious vibes of that here. Yeah, you know, I recommend this to anyone who's, you know, wants to collect sick issues. Anyone who's like, you know, collecting for covers, this is a cool one too. It's pretty cheap, but you know, good story, good, you know, vigilante action if you're into that shit. A quick read, so the $2 I think is like a pretty, you know, worth it price. But if you guys can find this and you enjoy old school comics, pick it up, man, because it ain't bad. It's pretty good. Now, this is where it's going to start to get a little difficult because this is where the rating system comes in. And, you know, we do the 10-point system here. Like I've said in all the other comic videos, by no means am I an art or comic expert. This is just going off my personal enjoyment and stuff. But if I were to rate this issue on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd probably have to give this about maybe a 7.5. And, maybe part of it's due to the fact that I'm a little biased. I grew up in the 2000s. So the Garth Ennis run was what was, coming out prominently when I was a kid. And that's what I was reading more consistently than the original issues. And I think it was because it was just so fucking over the top violent, and it tied into the games I was playing and, to some degree the movies. So I related to those ones more, but I don't want to take away from these classic ones because they definitely laid the groundstone. And while I did read a lot of the Garth Ennis run, like Welcome Back Frank or the Max series, I did have a good chunk of the original comics because they were, like I said, so easy to come by, and they were fairly cheap. But every once in a while there was a really memorable one, and this was one of them. So again, 7.5. It's not I'm just giving it that rating because while it is really enjoyable, it is a very fast read. It's not really that deep. It's just action, you know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think where the 9s and the 10s start coming, and I don't want to sell it short, like I don't want to say this and set the bar for all the original ones, but I feel like the 9s and the 10s don't really start coming until the 2000s. But again, that could just be me. I like when superhero comics get really fucking violent and dark. I know a lot of people, a lot of old heads don't really like that shit, but come on, man, this is the future, old man, just fucking deal with it. But yeah, this was The Punisher, the big checkout. Recommend it to you guys into the old school shit, into the action shit. Don't know what else I could really say about it, but yeah, definitely a fun little read. If you guys like this, if you want to see me cover more of the 90s run, the 80s run, I have a good chunk of pretty much everything except for the new stuff because new Marvel fucking sucks. But yeah, if you want to hear any of that shit, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.